Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
I was supposed to be halfway across the city when I realized I'd forgotten the documents I needed for the meeting. I cursed under my breath, turned the car around, and sped back home, not knowing that the next 10 minutes would set my entire life on fire. I had only come back for one stupid folder, a client file I'd forgotten in my rush this morning. I was muttering to myself about deadlines when I turned into the driveway and froze. Fletcher's electric bike, bright red, impossible to mistake, leaned casually against my garage like it lived there. My heartbeat stuttered. Fletcher, my neighbor from the next street, a man I knew, a man I waved to while mowing the lawn, a man who should not be anywhere near my house when I wasn't home. A cold ripple slid down my spine. I stepped out of the car. The afternoon air felt unnaturally still, thick, as if the world held its breath with me. Inside, the house greeted me with silence, not the normal lived-in quiet, but something rigid, staged, like silence hiding behind a curtain. "Danielle?" My voice sounded wrong, too light, too hopeful. No answer. That was the first hook in my chest. Then I heard it. A faint, steady sound drifting from upstairs, running water. My stomach flipped. No faucet should be running. No shower should be on. No one should be here except my wife, and even she wasn't expecting me. Each step up the staircase felt like I was climbing toward a ledge. My fingertips brushed the banister, slick with sweat I didn't realize was mine. At the top, the hallway was half lit, the bathroom door slightly ajar. Steam curled out like fingers inviting me or warning me. I pushed the door open, and my world cracked. Fletcher stood in my bathtub, torso bare, water beating across his skin. Danielle stood beside him, soaked blouse clinging painfully tight, skirt dripping onto the tile. Their expressions didn't belong to innocence. For a second, everything inside me went silent. Then it collapsed all at once. Danielle's mouth opened. "Douglas, this isn't." "Don't." My voice came out flat, steel laid over a breaking heart. Fletcher reached for a towel, but I stepped back, grabbed the door, and slammed it shut, locking them inside with the kind of finality that felt biblical. They rattled the handle. I whispered through the crack, "Try to break it down and see what happens," because I already knew what came next. And they had no idea the trap had just begun. Their voices chased me down the hallway, frantic, muffled, desperate. But I didn't slow down. I didn't waver. If pain had a sound, it was the trembling rasp in Danielle's voice when she cried, "Douglas, please, just listen." Funny how people beg for honesty only after they've destroyed it. I headed straight to the basement. The old wooden steps creaked under my feet, carrying echoes of a life that suddenly felt foreign. Down here, everything smelled like dust, memories, and the versions of myself I used to be before betrayal made me older. On the far shelf sat the relic I needed, an ancient mechanical alarm clock with a brass frame and a vicious, nervous tick. I picked it up. It felt heavier than it should, like justice sometimes does. As I climbed back upstairs, the ticking synchronized with my heartbeat, each click sharpening my anger into something colder, more deliberate. This wasn't revenge. Revenge needs passion. This was strategy. I stopped outside the locked bathroom door. Fletcher pounded from the inside. "Douglas, man, this is a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere broken. "You're in my bathtub, Fletcher." Danielle sobbed. "Please, please don't do anything stupid." "Don't worry," I said. "I already did the stupid thing. I trusted you." I placed the ticking clock on the floor, right against the bathroom door. The echo of that tiny metal body touching the tile made both of them fall silent. "Douglas, what is that?" Fletcher's voice cracked. "Something that explodes," I whispered. Aghast, then absolute stillness. I let that fear linger, long enough for them to understand they were no longer in control of the narrative they thought they were writing behind my back. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You won't move. You won't touch the door. Otherwise, it will happen. Boom. I'll return soon, with company." Danielle hiccuped through her tears. "Company?" "Yes," I said. "Witnesses. And your wife, Fletcher. The clock kept ticking. The trap was set. The stage was ready. And their time, just like the clock, was running out. By the time I parked outside Cecilia's house, the clock's ticking was still in my head, a metronome for betrayal. I didn't even finish knocking before the door swung open. Cecilia stood there with her hair tied back, eyes red-rimmed, as if she already sensed the truth she dreaded. "Douglas," she whispered. "Why are you?" "It's Fletcher," I said softly. "You need to come with me." Her breath hitched. She didn't ask where or why, just grabbed her coat with shaking hands. That alone nearly broke me. The innocent always move faster, hoping the truth isn't what they think it is. The drive back felt like a countdown. Cecilia stared out the window, gripping the seatbelt as if bracing for impact. When we reached the house, two neighbors I trusted waited on the porch, people willing to stand as witnesses. A lawyer friend of mine arrived moments later, breathless, briefcase in hand. "Is everything ready?" he asked. I nodded. "Let's end this." The house felt colder now, as if betrayal had lowered the temperature. The ticking from the hallway grew louder as we approached the bathroom, that tiny clock acting like a judge calling the room to order. I looked at Cecilia. "Are you sure?" She nodded, jaw trembling but eyes fierce. "Open it." I crouched, picked up the clock, their terrified silence leaking through the door like steam, and slid the key into the lock. The door swung open, and there they were. Fletcher and Danielle stood frozen, their clothes clinging to them, guilt carved across their faces like cracks in porcelain. The steam had faded. Reality hadn't. Fletcher took one step forward. "Cecilia, please." Her palm whipped across his face so fast he barely saw it coming. The sound echoed against the tiles. "It's over," she said. "I'm filing for divorce." Danielle turned to me, hollow-eyed. "Douglas, please, let me explain." "No," I said quietly. "Our marriage ends today." Behind them, the bathtub still ran, the water overflowing like the lies they drowned themselves in. The door had opened, and everything they'd hidden was finally exposed to daylight. The morning after the bathroom incident felt like walking through the ash of a burned-out life. Danielle's suitcase was already gone from the hallway. My house felt hollow, scraped clean of the lies that once lived here. I spent the morning handling everything alone, exactly as the law required. My petition for divorce was submitted quickly, clean signatures, clear evidence, and one decisive clause. 6.1. The rule that if the husband or wife is caught cheating, they are not entitled to any jointly acquired property in the event of a divorce. Danielle had signed that contract willingly. Now was the very knife that cut her out of my life. By noon, the paperwork was filed. Nothing dramatic, just cold, quiet finality. But there was one person I still needed to speak to. In the afternoon, I called Cecilia. "Would you meet me?" I asked, unsure if she'd even want to see me after what we both endured yesterday. A pause. Then gently, "Where?" "Cafe Mariner, the one on the far side of town." "I'll come," she said. Her voice was soft, tired, and yet steady. I got there early and chose a small corner table. The clinking cups, low conversations, and warm light felt surreal against the chaos of the last 24 hours. I rehearsed what I needed to say. Apologies, explanations, maybe even condolences. After all, we were two people wounded by the same betrayal. Then the door chimed. Cecilia stepped inside, and something in me snapped loose, like breath I'd held for months. I stood up so fast that the chair nearly toppled. Before I could think, I crossed the room in a few long strides. She looked startled, then her face softened in recognition. I reached her, pulled her into my arms, and kissed her deeply, knowing finally we didn't need to hide anymore. "My love," I whispered, my voice breaking with the relief of a plan finally complete. Everything worked out exactly as we planned. No one suspected a thing. Her smile was slow and victorious. "Darling, your idea was brilliant." Fletcher ran straight into the trap. "You came up with a brilliant way to lure my fool Fletcher." I chuckled. The voice message from AI with Danielle's voice was helpful. Modern technology. "I still can't believe you generated Danielle's voice so perfectly." One message about a leaky faucet, and Fletcher ran to her like a loyal mechanic. I chuckled softly, loosening the nuts on the pipes before work helped the illusion. We sat down together, fingers intertwined. Danielle and Fletcher had fallen right into the trap. And now, finally, Cecilia and I were free. 10 days later, the divorce was finalized. The judge's gavel had barely fallen before a sense of liberation washed over me, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. All the property, every asset, every decision was now mine. Danielle and Fletcher were gone from my life, their betrayal reduced to a shadow I would never revisit. Cecilia and I met afterward, quietly reviewing our new reality. There was no need for bitterness between us. Clause 6.1, her marriage contract had done its work. In that clarity, I saw Cecilia's eyes, the same mix of relief and triumph mirrored in my own. We were survivors, not victims. We decided, almost instinctively, to start anew. California called to us with the promise of sun and endless horizons. Within days, we purchased a villa on the oceanfront, a place untouched by lies or deceit. The sound of the waves became our daily meditation, washing away the remnants of our betrayal. On the day of our wedding, standing hand in hand with Cecilia, I realized how far we had come. The past, the lies, the heartbreak, the shattered marriages had led us here. And for the first time, I could imagine the future without fear or hesitation. I didn't feel guilty, no. In this life, only the strongest survive. Cecilia and I were predators in the modern world. As the sun dipped into the Pacific, painting the sky in golds and pinks, I whispered to Cecilia, "This is ours, truly ours." Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.